2 seconds.
Okay, Rabbi say I feel in Chanukah. Today, the idea of this Chanukah, besides Chanukah, we're making a shtickle Chanukah Mesiba. It's we finished Baruch Hashem here in Kol we just finished the second parak, and some of us we finished already a Chazar in the second parak. And Hashem, next on Friday we'll be giving out a test of Hashem and the whole Gemara Ashetayis in the second parak. It's already written up, Baruch Hashem. And there'll be a Matas Chorbetzida, whoever takes the test. And today we have, Baruch Hashem, a big schus and privilege and a covet for us to hear Divrei Chizik on Chanukah and Chizik for ourselves from the Yeshiva Rav Leib Shapiro and the Rav Leib Menachem.
Actually, according to the Rambam, this Suda is a Suda's mitzvah. The Rambam holds that on Chanukah there's a chiyuv to have a Suda, to have Simcha. So Machlek is the Rambam in the Tur writes that you don't have to have Suda because only they were Kaveh Yontif only for Kalal Hidoer, not for Simcha, not like Purim, but the Rambam says they were Kaveh Yontif also for Simcha, so the Meforshim say therefore you have to have a Suda. So the Suda is a Suda's mitzvah according to the Rambam. Anyway, today is Zeis Chanukah. Now the reason it's called Zeis Chanukah, the Pashtus, is because the Kriya is Zeis Chanukah Samizbeach. But the Peil Mamish, because the name, the way it's according to Mini Yisrael, is Zeis Chanukah, as if we're saying, Zeis Chanukah, this is Chanukah. What do you mean, this is Chanukah? The whole week was Chanukah, 8 days Chanukah. Obviously, the culmination of Chanukah really comes to a real head, is Dafka today. Zeis Chanukah, so whatever limudim, whatever heiros, whatever lessons we get from Chanukah, so today is the day that we can take it even more serious, and today it will have a better effect than any other day. Because Bechal, it says in Gemara that by a star actually, Hakol Heil Chacharachitum, everything goes after the end of it. So here also, the end of Chanukah, Zeis Chanukah, this contains the whole Chanukah. So all the Yonim that are there on Chanukah, according to Halacha, according to Kabbalah, according to Siddhis, all the Eiris and Hamshachas and all the Yonim that we find in Svarim, the beginning of Chanukah, today is the day when all this happens. And therefore, today is the day to think really what is Chanukah to us, what does Chanukah mean, what's the depth of Chanukah, and B'meila we'll be able to take it to ourselves and change our lives according to what Chanukah is. Now what the Yont of Chanukah is about, what happened, what was the Nes, what things took place, so we know in the Gemara we find a little bit, we find other Svarim, but mainly we find it in Al HaNisim. And Al HaNisim it says, what was the problem, what did the Yevoni want? So in Al HaNisim we say that the Yevoni wanted lahashkicham toirasecha v'lahaviram mechuki ritzenecha. They wanted lahashkicham to make him forget your Torah, v'lahaviram mechuki ritzenecha, and to take him away from the chukim of your will. And the Meforshim ask, why do we mention chukim here? Why dafke chukim? We know in mitzvahs we have 3 categories of mitzvahs. We have edus, chukim, and mishpatim. Mishpatim are mitzvahs that have a reason, as like the Gemara says, if the Torah would not chas v'sholem been given, we would have kept them anyway. Like the sin of all these mitzvahs. Eidos are mitzvahs that if not for the Torah, we wouldn't keep them. But after the Torah gave us those mitzvahs, there is a reason for it. Shabbos. If not for the Torah, we wouldn't keep Shabbos. But after the Torah gave us the mitzvah, we have a reason, because Eibush created the world in 6 days, a 7th day rest, etc. Film, all these are eidos, they're not mishpatim. They're edus. And then there are mitzvahs called chukim, very few. Meforshim, the Meina mitzvahs count chukim, very few. Some say 8, 9, 10, 12, whatever there is, very few chukim. Chukim are mitzvahs that have no reason whatsoever, they don't make sense, and we don't have any reason. That's not too many. So here when we say that they wanted to make us go away from the Torah, ashkicham teirasecha or la'aviram, to take us away, mechuki ritzenecha, why do we mention chukim? Why dafke chukim? It's not only chukim they wanted to take us away from the whole Torah they wanted to take away. Why dafke does it mention chukim? Especially we know if you look in the Svarim to talk about the history of that time, the main 3 averas that they wanted was in the Rosh Hashanah, Someach, Shin Mem Ches, Shabbos, Mila, Chodesh, which are none of them are chukim. Now they had other things also, we know. We know that it says that they had a gzeira, Kisva Lachem al Keren Asher, She'el Lachem Chelik L'Kei Yisrael. They wanted this to write on a Keren Asher, on a horn of Asher. We have no share in the L'Kei Yisrael and the God and the Eibishter of the Yidden. By the way, I heard a word. Why is keren asher? Why did they have to pick a keren? Why a horn? What's the meaning of a horn? You say those days, if a baby couldn't nurse, there were no baby bottles. So what did they do? They would take a horn, make a little tiny hole, and pour the milk in, the mother's milk in there, and that's how the baby was able to drink. That's what they wanted. When you start raising your children, from when they're tiny babies, raise them in the philosophy that Eilachem Chelik with the Kei Yisrael. You have no Chelik. But mainly it was Someach, Shabbos, Melech, Chedesh. So why do we mention After Chukim? And if we do mention Chukim, why do we say Chukim Ritzei Necho? Why is it important to mention Ritzei Necho? Chukecho. Lashkichem Teiresecho, La'avirem Chukecho. To take him away from your Chukim, if you do want to mention Chukim, why do we say Chukim Ritzei Necho? Why mention Ritzei Necho? So to explain that, let's go to another inyan, not actually another inyan, but not Chanukah Dafke, and then we'll get back to Chanukah. You know the famous Shaila, the Yerushalmi has the Shaila, why does the Torah start with a base? The first letter of the Aleph base is Aleph, which means automatically that Aleph is the Choshev's the letter. So the Torah, would make sense, should start with an Aleph. Why does the Torah start with a base? And the Yerushalmi answers, because the Aleph is a Rosh Tevis Orur. Of course. Beis is a Rosh Tevis Baruch. So it starts with a base because of that, not with an aleph, because we don't want to start with a letter that has a Rosh Tevis of something negative, of order. And here the Mefarshim ask, the Eben Ezer, other Mefarshim ask, I'm sure we could find words, good words that start with an aleph, and chas v'sholem bad words that start with a base. Just because it happens to be that this is order and this is Baruch, that's why the Torah started with a base. The fact that we ask a question that should have started with an aleph means that al piseichel, al piseider, should start with an aleph. So we changed the seder because we found a word with an aleph that's a negative word. What's the pshat? So that's one thing we have to understand. Then there's another pshat that it says in Medrash. It says, I think in Balei HaTosfos, Rabbi Saint Balei HaTosfos. Another reason why it starts with the base, because base is the shape of the world. Because the Gemara says in Baba Basra that the world is doimel achsadre. It's like an achsadre has three walls and one wall is open. So too, the world was created that three sides are finished, one side not. Exactly what that means, I don't know, but that before I should talk about it and how to explain it. But this is what the Gemara says. So according to this, the world is in the shape of a base. Has three walls like a base, has three sides and one side empty. That's why the Torah starts with a base. And here again, the Mefarshim ask, what does that mean? Because the world is in the shape of a base, that's why the Torah should change its Seder. The Torah doesn't have to follow the Seder of the world. It works the opposite. The world was created b'shvil ha-Torah. Beis bereishis, beis reishis. The world was created b'shvil ha-Torah shenikras reishis u'b'shvil Yisrael shenikras reishis. So the Torah was created for the world. Not the Torah was going to be because of the world. It says in Medrash, Istakol be'eraisa bor alma. Hashem looked in the Torah, created the world. So we'll say that the Torah changed its seder because of the world. It also needs more explanation. Then there's another interesting thing when we talk about the fact that the Torah starts with a base. We know the story in the Gemara that Talmei HaMelech gathered the Skenim and he forced them to translate the Torah into Yavonis. And he wanted to make sure that they're not going to make any changes, so he put them all in a separate room, so they shouldn't be able to talk between themselves to make changes. The Peil Mamish, the Eibishter put into the mind of all of them to make the same changes that they had to make for the translation. One change they made, the first one was, they didn't translate Breishis Bora Elikim, because they were afraid if they translated it that way, he's going to taina Breishis Bora Elikim, as if there's a Metzias, a being called Breishis, created Elikim, created Eibishter, created Hashem. So they changed it and they wrote Elikim Bora Breishis. That Elikim created in the beginning, etc. So it's interesting, it comes out that the way it was translated to Talmai, it starts with an aleph. It starts talking with the word, Elikim Bora Breishis. It's interesting, there's something there, even though there was a reason for it, but everything, especially when it comes to Torah, is exact, so there must be an exact reason why the Torah starts with an aleph when it was translated to Talmai HaMelech. So, the pshat here is, it says in Svarim, and actually the Rebbe talks about it by Yichus, and you understood probably, if I'll be talking here, I'll have to mention the Rebbe, that's it's a given, so the truth is I don't even have to mention it, without me saying it, you'd know it yourself, but I'll say it anyway. Anyway, he explains it like this. We have The famous Gemara, where the Gemara explains the Pasuk, where it says, Al of the Haaretz, Al Ozav Masterosi. Why, Pasuk in Yirmiyah, why was of the Haaretz, why did we lose Eretz Yisrael? Why did we go to Golas? Al Ozav Masterosi, because the Eden left the Torah. So the Bach, in Shulchan Aruch on the tour, Bach explains, this is really based on the Talmid of the Rabbeinu Yonah on the spot in the Gemara in the Dorim, says, it doesn't mean they didn't learn Torah. The time of the Churban, they did learn Torah. Actually, they learned a lot of Torah. But Ashalei Borcha B'Torah Tchila, they didn't say Birchas HaTorah. And the Bach explains, what does it mean they didn't say Birchas HaTorah? What do they care to say, not to say? It takes a minute, it's not the pshat they were afraid to waste time. Why didn't they say Birchas HaTorah? So he explains it by Arich, it's a very interesting Bach, it's a pretty long Bach. And he explains that doesn't mean they didn't make the bracha, actually they didn't say the words, maybe they did say the words. They didn't have the feeling of what Birchas HaTorah represents. Birchas HaTorah represents, we say, Asher Kedishonu b'mitzvayso v'tzivonu, L'asik b'divrei Torah, or al divrei Torah, whichever nusach we say, that we know that the Torah was given by Hashem, and you feel that through Torah you get dovuk la'Kadosh Baruch Hu, you get connected to Hashem. Which in simple words would mean you feel the Kedusha of Torah. And they didn't feel the Kedusha of Torah. And therefore there was a Churban Beis HaMikdash, because they learned Torah basically, if you want to put it in these words, they learned Torah as a Chochmeh, which is the biggest Chochmeh. The Pasuk says, Ki hi chochmaschem uveinaschem leino ha'amim. It's the greatest Chochmeh in the world. But they learned Torah as a Chochmeh, not as Kedusha. Torah is Chochmasei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's Hashem's Chochmeh. And when the Rambam puts it, Hu Chochmasei echad. It's not the pshat, it's his Chochmeh, which means there is him and his Chochmeh. He and his Chochmah are one. The Torah is him. And the Rambam explained, what does that mean? How could the Chochmah of somebody be one with him? So he says, we don't understand it. The Rambam says, we can't understand. But the fact is, that this is the Eibishter. The Torah is the Eibishter. So besides the Chochmah, that's a Chochmah true. But the Ikar of Torah is the Kedusha of Torah. And that's what they did not feel. That's the pshat like Borcha B'Torah Tchila. They didn't feel in learning Torah the Kedusha of Torah. So here we have two things. We have in Torah the feeling, the approach to Torah that this is Chochmasei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we connect ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we learn Torah. And then we have the actual learning that we have to learn to understand what we're learning. What comes first? So as the Lashon is, Borcha B'Torah Tchila. First comes the understanding of the Kedusha of Torah. Which means before we start learning, before we get to sit down to learn a piece of Gemara, we have to keep in mind the Kedusha of Torah. Doesn't mean that every second while we're learning we have to keep in mind Kedusha of Torah. You'll never learn. Just like it says when you write a get, you have to write Lishma. You can't sit and write the get and keep Lishma in mind. So it says before you start, you say, I'm writing L'Shem this woman. Kedusha Sefer Torah. When you write a Sefer Torah, you have to have in mind Kedusha Sefer Torah. So you keep in mind before. It's exactly what is supposed to be here. You're supposed to, before you start learning, you're supposed to know that this is the Kedusha of Torah. That's the reason, the emissary reason why the Torah starts with a base. To tell you, when you're starting to learn, it's already step number 2. Actually, the Hashgacha Prat is that the Gemaras also start without base. Why? So, Poshe Pshat is because the Sharblat, the front page is Aleph. I don't know if that's the reason, or maybe it's a mistake, I don't know, that the first printer made. Whatever reason, the Eibishter made that the Gemara starts with a base, Daf base. Why a base? To tell you that when you sit down to learn, this is the second step. This is not the first step. This is really the depth of what the Yerushalmi means, that Aleph is Orur and Beis is Baruch. It's not, the Lashon there is Rosh Tevis, but there's much more depth to it. It's not the Rosh Tevis. If you learn Torah as an Aleph, that means when you sit down to learn the Chochmeh, that's Orur. Because the Gemara says, when you learn Torah, Zocha Nasa Leisam Chaim, Lo Zocha Nasa Leisam Amovis. If you learn Torah and you're not Zeicha, now what does it mean you're not Zeicha? You don't have the merit. There's a deeper shot. Zocha comes from the word Zakus. Clear. If you learn Torah with a clear mind the way you're supposed to, it's Nasa Leisam Chaim. But if you learn Torah Lo Zochu, you don't have that schus, that clarity, then Nasa Leichas V'Sholem Sam Amovis comes poison. That's Orur. That's what the Yerushalmi says. Why does Torah start with a base? Because if you start with an aleph, there's an order there, chas v'sholem. If you start thinking that the Torah, as we're learning the chokhmah of the Torah, that's the beginning, then chas v'sholem could be an order. But when you start with a base, meaning that you know that this is the second and the proper approach is with the kedusha of Torah, then that's baruch. Not only the Rosh Hashanah, that happens to be a tetzah, that's a result. So therefore the Rosh Hashanah fits. But as the teichen of the inyan. And that's also the pshat, in the second pshat, that it's because the world is the shape of a base. Because the pshat is that in order to, it says in Svarim, it says based action on the Yalkut, why Taki is the world shaped like a base? Like I said, I don't know what Gashmi is what that means, but the shape of a base that one side is empty. One side is not finished. Why? Because the Eibishter said, I created the world, I want you to finish it off. The Pasuk says, Asher bara Elokim laseis, Hashem created the world. What does laseis mean? You have to think about it. What's the pshat in the Pasuk? The Eibishter created laseis, to do. So Rashi in Medrash says, laseis is second. The Eibishter created the world, but he says, I left a piece for you. We got to finish it. What do we got to finish? The world is a world, but we got to bring HaKadosh Baruch into the world through Torah and mitzvahs. So we got to finish off the last side. When can we finish off that last side of the world? To accomplish the goal what Hashem wanted for us with creating the world is if we have the base. If we know that Torah learning is the base, if we have the Kedusha of Torah. When we sit down to learn Torah, the same thing we're doing mitzvahs, and we have in mind the Kedusha of the Torah and the mitzvahs, then we will accomplish what the world is created with the base. Besides Tam Derech Agav, they say a story that when Alter Rebbe Balatani was in jail, that's at that time, a new map came out of the New World with America, and they already realized that he was a great person and very chacham, and so they brought him the map to show them. So he looked at the map and he said, "There's a mistake here." He said, "How do you know? It's the first map. How do you know if it's a mistake or not?" A few days later, they got a message that there was a mistake, whatever he said. So they asked him, "How did you know?" So he said, "In the base of Breishis, there's a map of the whole world. And I saw that this is wrong." Now, I don't know exactly how that works. You got to be a tzaddik. Ili daiti v'yisi, if I understand it, I'd also be a tzaddik. But anyway, so this reason that Mefarshim give, that is because of a base, is like the shape of the world. It's not because Torah follows the world. It's the opposite. It's when can you fix what the base is supposed to show, to bring the end, the other side, to bring Hashem into the world, is if you have that feeling of base. Now this is the reason why when they translated for Talmei HaMelech, it started with an aleph. Because this Nakuda of learning Torah, having the Kedusha of Torah, is not shaykhs by a goy. It's only by a goy, it's not shaykh. That's what the Medrash says. It's a famous Medrash, everyone knows that. The Medrash says, Chochma yesh bagoyim tamin. Torah yesh bagoyim al tamin. If someone will tell you that goyim have chochma, believe it. They have chochma. But if they tell you they have Torah, don't believe it. And the question is, about it, they don't learn Torah like we do, but there are goyim who learn Torah. There are goyim who even learn Gemara. There were goyim. What does it mean? Impossible to believe that goyim have Torah. So the Pshat and Mefarshim say is, it doesn't mean they have chochma, they don't have Torah. The Torah that they learn is chochma only. Chochma yesh b'goyim afilum the Torah. Torah, the real thing of Torah, the Kedusha, they don't have. So when they translated the Torah to Talmei HaMelech, it started with an aleph, because to them the learning is the aleph. There is no such thing as the Kedusha of Torah before. Now, how is a Yid, a Keli, to be able to absorb the Kedusha of Torah? The Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Bli Gvul. We know HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Bli Gvul, infinite. And his Chochmah, which is, like we said before, him, it's also infinite. How do we, in our little finite mind, which is very limited, able to contain the infinity of the Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of HaKadosh Baruch himself? How is that possible? So the truth is, simply it's impossible. It's impossible. The Gemara says, to put an elephant through a hole of a needle is impossible. Why? Because this is big and this is small. So, but it's not it's bigger, and still it's impossible. The Gemara actually says in Barachas, you can't even dream that. So how is it possible, something that's infinite, to come into a finite place? The answer is it's impossible, be'etzem. But that's only if a person sticks to his limitations, to his, well, we use the words of Kabbalah, his yeshes, his metzias, That's a contradiction. That makes Hagbolas. That's a limit. I'm limited. So how can I take the unlimited? But if a person unclothes himself of his Metzias, and he is an Onof, and he's mevatel himself, his Metzias, to Hashem, then you have no Hagbolah. Your Hagbolas fall off because there's no you. And you learn Torah just because you want to learn Torah, not because of my own Yeshes and Metzias. Then you're okay for the Kedusha of the Torah, the Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. That's the pshat in Shemon Esrei. We always say, taking from the Gemara, I am like dust to everybody, open my heart to Torah. What's the connection between these two things? They're two separate inyanim. You have to be bottled, you can't be a balgaiver. That's nafshik over lakilti. There's another thing. You ask Hashem, open my heart to Torah. Why did we put them together? There must be some connection. Also, why did we say psach libi b'seirasech, open my heart to Torah? It should be psach moichi. The brain understands Torah. Why psach libi? That we're not talking about understanding the Torah. You could understand the Torah. Lahavdul goy could also understand Torah. If he has a brain, he could understand. The feeling that you have in Torah, the kedusha of Torah, for that you can't get unless you have nafshik offer lakiltiyah. If you have nafshik offer lakiltiyah, you're mavatal yourself, and you unclothe yourself of your yeshes, and you sit and learn Torah with the feeling of kedusha that it's not me. Abad I have to learn, but the only reason because Hashem said so, no other reason, not because it's my metzias, it makes me better, makes me bigger. That's thinking of yourself, not of Hashem. But if you're nafshik offer lakiltiyah, then psach libi b'seirasecha, then your heart is open to Torah. The feeling that you're supposed to have in the Torah, in the understanding, not the understanding of the svaras of Torah, but the getting the connection to Hashem that's in the Torah, that you get only when you have bittul. And this is why we say psach libi b'seirasecha. It's the heart here that we're talking about. It's not talking about the brain. So this is what the approach has to be to Torah. This is what the Yevonim wanted to take away from the Yidden. We say la'ashkicham teirosecho. Doesn't say la'ashkicham ha-Torah. Actually, they didn't mind if you learned Torah. They were a very, very cultured nation. They were the smartest. We know the smartest people, the Chachamim at that time in the world, were the Yevonim. Sabba de Be'atune, we have the elders of Athens. They were the smartest people. So they were happy with other people. It was their line. Study, think. And this is the greatest Chochmah. What they didn't want, they wanted us to forget Torah Secho. That aspect, that's what bothered them. That you're learning Torah and you feel in the Torah that it's Hashem. Learn Torah because of a Chochmah. And the same thing when it came to Chukir Etzenecho, the mitzvahs. They didn't care if you do mitzvahs. Do it. You have a good reason. If you're a smart person, you have a reason to do it. It makes sense. Doing the mitzvahs just because Hashem said so, not because of the reason, that's what bothered them. That's the connection of the mitzvahs to the kedusha of the mitzvahs to Hashem. Asher kedishonu b'mitzvahso. That's why every bracha we make by a mitzvah. So in essence, every mitzvah is a chukkah. The fact that we understand the reasons of some mitzvahs, that's Hashem was kind to us and made us understand a little bit. But the essence, why do we do a mitzvah? Any mitzvah. In essence, it's a chukkah. That's why by Porah Aduma it says, Zois chukas ha-Torah. This is the chukkah of the Torah, and it goes on with the mitzvah of Porah Aduma. So the Mefarshim also asked, they should have said, Zois chukas ha-Porah. This is not the chukkah of the Torah. Just like it says, Zois chukas ha-Pesach. By Korban Pesach. Why does it say Zois chukas ha-Torah? To tell you that the whole Torah is a chukkah. A person could forget for a moment, and when you do a mitzvah that makes sense, you'll think, oh, this is the reason I do it. If every mitzvah would make sense, we might forget at least. So the Eibush had to give us at least one mitzvah that makes no sense whatsoever. That even Shlomo HaMelech said, and I couldn't understand. Everything I understood, he said, except this one. At least one mitzvah shouldn't make sense. And that tells us that this is the essence of the whole Torah. Zeis chukas ha-Torah of the whole Torah. So when it says here in Nisim, and the question was asked, why do we mention chukim? Because it doesn't mean dafke chukim. All mitzvahs, the aspect of chukim that's in every mitzvah, that's what bothered them. And even that, I'll go a step further. You could do a chukkah, which makes no sense, and you could think to your mind, I'm doing it even though I don't understand, because I know Hashem is so smart, much smarter than me, and He has a good reason I don't know. That's not the ultimate way you're supposed to do even chukim. Because then sof kol sof, you're doing it for a reason. Just, I don't know the reason. far as we're concerned, it's not negay if there is a reason or not. This is what the Eibishter wants. That's it. Not because I assume, I believe that he probably has a good reason. In other words, if he wouldn't have a good reason, I couldn't care. That's what they wanted. They wanted we should go away. The fact that it's your rotzen, that you're doing it just because it's the rotzen of Hashem. All this I explained before. They didn't want us to have, so to speak, that bittul to Hashem before we learn Torah, knowing that it's Torah secho and chukir etzeinecha, the chukim. That's what they didn't want. That's the reason it says why they were matama all the oils. Why they were matama the oils? It's mashma, it's not clear, but it's mashma that they didn't just have to be matama. They touched it, they made it tomei. The kavoneh, they were intentionally matama the oil. And the question is, if they were afraid that we might get it and start using it, so they wanted to make it tomei, they should have destroyed it. Shemen, it says in Svarim, represents chokhmah. We all know that. It says in Kabbalah, in Svarim. It says in Reya Zayis, if you see a Zayis, Yitzapel Chochmah, you wait for Chochmah. Shemen, Zayis, which is Shemen, is Chochmah. They didn't mind if we have the Chochmah of Torah. They wanted it should be in a Tomedik way. They were Matame, Kol Ashmanim Shebehechol. They wanted that the Shmanim, the oil, which is represents the Chochmah, should become Tomei. Tomei means in a way that they have it. We should learn Torah because it's an interesting chokhmah. But not to learn Torah with the kedusha of Torah. That's what they didn't want. Not to do mitzvahs because of the kedusha of the mitzvah, because it's Hashem. Hu chokhmah seyechad, he and his chokhmah when he learned tzayna yechad. That's one of the reasons that, just another moment or two, one of the reasons why there was such a big mess, even though the famous kasha that all the Mefarshim asked, they only had tomadik oil, and the Torah which only lasts for one day, they had the tomadik oil, so they couldn't light it. Why couldn't they light it? Tumah hutra b'tzibur. This is an aveda, which is a tzibur-dik aveda, and tumah hutra b'tzibur. Hutra b'tzibur, but you're allowed to. So what's the big thing? So different thing. Sure, different svarim answers. The whole vort is, according to this pshat, and this is taken obviously from Chassidus, from Kabbalah, and other svarim, drush, sifre drush. The kavanah theirs was befeirish. They wanted you to light with Shem and Tomei. Had there not been a nes, they would have accomplished that you lit the Shem. Okay, it's al pi it would have been allowed, but the concept of lighting the Shemen, which is Chochmah, and B'chal, fire represents Chochmah. We know how to even in the comic books when they want to say a guy got a good idea, they have a light bulb. Light is Chochmah. They wanted you to light the menorah with Shem and Tomei. It should be representing the idea that you're doing it in a Tomedik way. And that's why the Eibishter B'dafke made a nes, that we should not light it with Shem and Tomei. And this is the lesson we're supposed to take from Chanukah, and especially, as like I said in the beginning, Chal says in Halacha that you have to be like the Chsimim Ein Apsiche. So I'm going back, especially on Zeis Chanukah. Zeis Chanukah, which we said, Zeis Chanukah, as if saying, today is Chanukah. Yesterday was also Chanukah, but the real Chanukah is when you have everything, all the days already, and the lessons today are much stronger for us to sit down and make a cheshbon to ourselves. How do we learn Torah? How do we do mitzvahs? How much of it do we do because of, makes sense, or our own mitzias, or we know that this is the Kedusha of Hashem, this is the Kedusha of Torah, this is mitzvahs, this is the Eibishter. And when we do a mitzvah, we're doing the Eibishter. The Medrash says, Kabdu es ha-mitzvahs, shehem shluchoi. Give kavod to them, my shluchim. And what's the din by a shliach? Shluchei shalodem kamoisei. So the mitzvahs are the Eibishter. So imagine you do a mitzvah. In other words, according to the Rambam, like I said in the beginning, that the Suda on Chanukah is a mitzvah. So eating this food here is the Eibishter, because this is doing because it's the Eibishter's rotzen. So it happens anyway, but not always do we feel it. On Chanukah we have a time, that's a time we should think about it, and many times we think about something, we come to different resolutions, hachlotes, but it doesn't really come b'maaseh. On a day, an auspicious day like today's Chanukah, it's much easier. If you make a hachlote, it's much easier, it should come down l'maaseh. So the Eibishter should help that we should all take the proper hachlotes, and from the Geula of Chanukah, the Gemara says, Mismir Gula L'Gula, from this Gula of Chanukah, we should come to the Gula Hasidah, and there, then, when Mashiach will come, V'niglo Kveit Hashem V'ro Kabos Yavdu Kepi Hashem Diber, so then we won't have to work hard to feel in everything in the world, the mitzvahs and Torah, even in the Inyanim of the world, V'ro Kabos Yavdu, even the Gashmias, Ki Pi Hashem Diber, and the Eibusher's help should be very, very soon. B'mheira b'yameinu b'korav mamish.
Olha, eu entendi tudo.
Você acompanha bem?
Entendi tudo. Fala muito bem, muito bom. É difícil entender aqui, mas eu entendi tudo. Tinham palavras que são em hebraico, mas é isso. E aí eu entendo. Entendi, entendi 90%.
O Hélio é o Gustavo. O Hélio é o Gustavo. Ele é o rabino do Rabaz ali, do lado que quando o Hélio vem. Não um grandão, o outro aqui.
Você é o rabino do Rabaz?
Deixa eu